Uh, Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris Watkin, and I'm a property journalist talking about the property market. But tonight we're just going to talk about Derby. With the biggest questions that I find from landlords is the property market and rental has grown. Why has it grown? But more importantly, I'm going to prove to you tonight why it will continue to grow for the reasons that will astound you, because there's a lot of misconceptions about the property market and why people are not buying anymore and why they're renting. And I'm going to show you why people are not buying at the moment. And genuinely, I will blow your mind. Okay, so we've got 38 minutes. So we're going to be a roller coaster. So here we go. There's going to be a lot of participation. Put your hands up. So get your arms ready. So here we go. So to know what's going to happen in the future, the best way is to look at the past. And therefore, what we're going to do first is we're going to look at what has happened in the Derby property in the last 20 years to enable us to work out what's going to happen in the next 20 years. Because you need to know as landlords is all these tenants going to end up buying properties and I'm going to have some empty properties, because that's the last thing we want is voids. So let's go. Here we go. So I think it's important. It's almost a British obsession to work out what's happening to property values. And the graph on the screen now shows you what's happened to property values in Derby since 1998. And the thing that's really surprising here is that you'll notice between 2000... I just got a laser. Oh, what happened there? Did I press the top one?
You didn't press the laser, did you?
No, I didn't, did I? Hold on. Oh, there you go. Is there a laser?
Just the big red big button.
You didn't tell me there was a laser?
Come on.
God, here, look. Right, here we go. Look. Wow, look at that. Can you notice the big growth was 2001 to 2005. Then she levelled off. Those were the magic years where you all made your money. And then, do you know what happened in 2007, 2008? We had the credit crunch and they dropped, and notice how they've been slowly growing. The bit that's important is this. Look how the growth has been a lot shallower in the last 10 years compared to the growth between 2000 and 2005. But the bit that really screws most people's heads up is that look how it levelled off in 05, 06 and 07. Hold that thought. So, if you'd have bought an average value of a property today in Derby is £157,000 and 700. And if you go back to 1998, the average value was 44,800. If you'd have put that 44 grand into a building society today, you'd have £88,000. And if you put it in the stock market, you'd have £61,000. So you can quite clearly see that property does outperform, or has done in the past. And Darren, I'm happy for people to have these slides if they email, if they give them your details at the end. I'm happy for these slides to be used. So what I then did is I then looked at Derby and compared it to the locality, and as you can quite clearly see, the next door, your neighbouring district council areas, you've blown them all out of the water, but don't get too cocky because Leicester's blown you out of the water. But I thought what was interesting was how Derby, Nottingham and Leicester have all performed. That Derby's in the middle, but Nottingham has not performed particularly well, but Leicester has done very, very well. I could spend hours talking about why Leicester's outperformed Derby, but I think that's not the purpose of today. That is just to show you that Derby has performed particularly well in the last 20 years. So, and again, let's not go into a huge amount of detail here, because again, I'm more than happy for these slides to be used. But you can quite clearly see what's happened. The green line is detached, for those at the back, and then we've got semis in the yellow, and we have terraced in the orange, and flat is that greyish colour. And you can see how basically everything has moved up in the general direction. But this is the next slide, which will blow your mind. Look what has actually happened to the different types of property and the values. In the last 20 years, detached houses have risen by 218%, whilst flats have only been up by 138%. It all hasn't gone up at the same rate. So if you'd have bought a flat 20 years ago, on average, they've gone up, by, as I said, by just under 140%. But if you'd bought a terrace, they've gone up by 280%. So that shows that in the last 20 years, the better investment has been the terraced house compared to the apartment. That's not to say that apartments aren't good value for money, because as you know, there's two ways that you can earn money from a buy-to-let property. One is the capital growth and one is the yield. And again, some apartments do offer fantastic yields, as long as the management charges, etc. So what I then did is there's a nice bit of software out there which allows you to look at the average value of a property on a street. And as you can quite clearly see, we've got the centre and the bottom end, which is the blue area. The cooler the colours, the cheaper the areas. So all you posh people will live at the top, and then off at Little Lover and Mickleover, and a little bit down there. And then we've obviously got Pear Tree in the middle, and Chatterston as well. So there's no surprises there, but I just loved looking at these maps. I could look at them all day, just to show how what you find is. And again, what is quite interesting is most British cities, the posh areas are always on the west. Anyone want to hazard a guess why they're always on the west? Say again? It's actually the wind. The prevailing wind in Britain comes from the west. So if you have the posh people living in the west, you have the industrial areas in the centre, so all the smoke would go off in that direction. So what you'll find in Britain is most of the posh areas are always on the western side, western area. There you go. So it's the gift. We have a gift that keeps giving, my love. Right. So, how much have property prices risen in Derby since the credit crunch? Anyone want to hazard a guess? So we are actually going to have a little bit of a put your hands up. So who thinks it's 4.3%? Put your hands up. 8.3? 12.7? 20, 24? Put your hands up, we've got to see them nice. 33, 38, 49. It's actually 33%. Not bad, is it? There you go. You get a mark, sir. Go to the top of the class if you're already there. Go to the bottom, you're there. Okay, this is an interesting graph. This shows you the number of property sales each month since 1998. And you will quite clearly see that it goes in that sort of, let's just go back. You will see on average in 98 and 2000, 2002, we were selling on average 500-600 properties. Then she dropped a bit. Can you remember it levelled off a bit in 05? There. And then she levelled it. And then we had the credit crunch drop down, and then moving up slightly there. Okay, for a bonus point, what was that? No letting agents, put their hands up. What was that spike there? Stamp duty. That was the stamp. That was all you landlords raking piggyback saying, "Come on, save the money." Okay, so again, the colours you can see on the screen there, and again we will get these graphs off to you afterwards. But it shows you the types of properties that are selling each month in the last. And again, there is the magic stamp duty month that when you all bought the city. And again, you'll see that generally detached, semis and terraced and apartments are all roughly the same sort of rate. And that's pretty predominant around the country, that the same types of numbers of houses sell each month. Notice how you have a little bit of a dip in the springer months. And then she goes up in the summer, she dips in the winter, and off we go. And I'll show you another graph later which shows that in a better detail. So how long does it take to sell a property in Derby? So what I've done now is I've looked at types, bedrooms and price ranges. And you can quite clearly see here that the semi-detached and the terraced are the ones that seem to sell quicker compared to detached and flats. That is very indicative of the rest of the UK. Interestingly, in most of the UK outside London, semis seem to be selling quicker than terraced houses. So obviously shows, there's a top tip for you, that detached houses do sell quite well in Derby. Let's move on to bedrooms. So God help you if you've got a one-bedroom flat. Okay? And as you can quite clearly see, again, that there's a nice dip there between 2 and 3 bedrooms, and then the 4 beds and the 5 beds. So again, showing you, because most semis are 2 and 3 bedrooms, that the best property tends to be a semi-detached 2 or 3 bedroom semi. And that's an important consideration as landlords, because one day you will have to sell your property, and there's no point in buying something that you can't sell, especially in a tough market. Let's look at price and how long it takes to sell a property down to price. I thought this is interesting, is that normally, nationally, she starts up here, she dips down, and then she goes back up. But that one there is an anomaly in terms of the 400 to 500. So that's all you posh people buying in Littleover, isn't it? Would you say, Darren? You know, Darling down? Very nice. And again, we can get these out to you after the event in greater detail. Okay, so what have we got here? This is a historic, and what I want you to look at is just generally look at the trend of those lines. And as you can quite clearly see, we had in 0809, when we had the credit crunch. What happened was everybody dumped their houses onto the market, and normal demand and supply shows that if you've got greater supply, what happens is that you have greater supply, not so much demand. Everyone was putting their houses on the market, so they just took longer to sell. Then we had a dip, but the general direction, see how she goes in a downward direction. So what was happening is, in 09 there was taking about 120 days to sell, and on average now we are probably looking at nearer 60 days, on average, to sell a property in Derby. But there, as you can quite clearly see, there are different ranges. Again, look, the blue line are apartments. Just see how long apartments take to sell. So be conscious of that if you're ever liquidating your assets. Upon saying that, there's plenty of landlords that will buy apartments with sitting tenants in. Well, that's my experience around the country. Darren, would that be fair in Derby? Yeah. So if you do want to sell your apartment, don't kick the tenant out, because the worst thing you can do is kick the tenant, is tell the tenant you put the house on the market, and what they end up doing is that they get a bit nervous and put that notice in, and then you've got no rent coming in, and an empty ex-tenanted property is a dog to sell. And if it's an ex-tenanted apartment, and it's a one bed, God help you. So please consider selling the property with a tenant in, and you'll get a better price on yourself. Have you noticed how there's less for sale boards? And you can quite clearly see that back in the good old days of 2008, the good old days when it was a for sale board erector, over 2,800 properties were on the market at any one time. Not bad when you consider there's over 115,000 houses in Derby. Then she had a drop. Now, interestingly, in 0809, what happened is that all the people that put their houses on the market because of the credit crunch decided that they were going to rent them out. So what happened is they dumped them all on the rental market. And what happened in 0809, especially 09, is that rents dropped through the ceiling, dropped through the floor. Absolutely, probably around 10 or 15%. And then we've got a downward direction, but again, notice how it almost peaks. And basically what happens is that summer, winter, summer, winter, summer, winter. So there are less properties for sale in Derby at the moment. But this is really important. This is the reason why property prices have grown in Derby. This is one of the major reasons. The first one is there's not enough houses being built, but the second one is those that do own them have not been put on the market, which is restricted supply. This is the reason why you don't want to be buying a for sale or erecting firm, because there's no properties for sale. So, you're all landlords. Let's move on to home ownership, and we need to talk about your tenants and what's actually happening with their mindset and their attitude, and are they going to continue to rent your properties off you? So, the census is done in every year ending with a 1, and so we've got 2001 and we've got 2011. You're going to say, well, it's not particularly up to date, but the UK is a bit like a supertanker. It shows the direction. So let's start in 2001. Just over 63,200 households were homeowned. What number did that number go down to in 2011?
45,000.
How many? 45,000. You're at the front, so you're going to be asked. 50,000. So, lovely green tie.
I didn't think it went down that much.
Okay.
I think
58. So.
60.
60. That's a lovely number. Come over here. So, what do you think?
Oh, 55.
55.
48.
And finally,
42.
42. 62,765. In most UK locations, that number went up. Home ownership between 2001 and 2011, remember we had the credit crunch in between of 08-09, home ownership in the UK in pure numbers terms grew. But here's the killer bit. In 2001, that represented 68.5% of households were home-owned, whilst in 2011 it was only 61. So hold on a second, the numbers remain the same, but the percentages crashed through the floor. What's happened? The thing is this, just under 10,000 households were built in Derby. But you lot went to Baltimore. Well, near as damn it. I mean, let's look at the numbers. Is that the rentals properties went from just under 6,800 to 17,200. That number there probably today stands at about 21 or 22,000 households. Taking the private rental sector from 7.3 to 16.8%. As a city, 16.8% is quite low. You go to Nottingham and it's in the early 20s. So as a city, Derby has a relatively low private rental sector at 16.8%, considering that the UK average is, if memory serves you well, 15.6. Again, these are 2011 figures. We can add a bit more to that. We can roughly work it out, but these are the best figures we've got in terms of actual figures. So, I'm assuming you rent all your properties out for pennies and pounds, or do you want the full market rate, sir? Full market rate, of course, that's why you go to Darren, isn't he? He's a good chap. So the question is this, okay? How much have rents increased in Derby since 2008? So we're going to start off at 79.5. Put your hands up if you think it's that. 44, 38, 37, 36, 28. Won't be anything else, will it? 11.4. It's 11.4. What has actually happened is, can you remember everyone dumped their houses on the market in 08, in 9? What happened then is the rents just dropped through the roof. If I'd have said what's happened to rents since 2010, it would be 38%. Because I deliberately chose 208 just to prove to you that what happened, this is something really weird happened in 2008. You see, you Brits are really weird. I'm one as well, so I can say that. If I bought a house in 2000 for 300,000, no, let's do that, let's start again. If I bought a house in the year 2000 for £100,000, and by 2008 it was worth £300,000, how much money have I made? 100 to 300. Shout it out. 200 grand. Then my value of my property dropped to 250. How much money have I made? 150, do we all agree? No, the Brits don't think that way. I've lost 50 grand. Honestly, that is what the attitude was in 08, 09. I've lost 50 grand. I never had it, but my house was worth £300,000. So what happened is everybody dumped their house, we'll come back to this, but everyone dumped their houses on the market for sale, couldn't sell them because I'm not losing money, so they dumped them on for rent. And again, we'll come back to that. That's one of the big reasons why people are renting. We'll come on to that in a second. So,